Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
October 19th, right? October 19th?
Good by me.
Okay,
Yes.
good. I
Friday,
didn't
actually.
lose a couple days. I'm so glad it's Friday. I was gone last weekend, so from the news desk, I need to get back in sync.
You better.
Yes, I better. So I went home for my 40-year high school reunion.
I told everybody it was your 10-year.
I went home for my 10-year high school reunion. And Steve's so sick of hearing about it. He's so glad it's over. Good, right?
Yes. A blessing.
And we told the same stupid stories in 40 years. So we're going to tell stories today on financial IQ. So we're here. Good morning. And let's get to work. So Brian's got me on the clicker. So when we look at and think about financial IQ, this is going to be very, very basic. And it's really going to be all about thinking about the business in relationship to profit. But in order to win the profit game, you've got to win the productivity side. And so that's really what we're going to focus on today. If we want to dig deeper later on and have you go different directions with it, that'd be great. But we're really just going to talk about how productivity really affects profit, right? Okay. So when we're managing the productivity and the expenses of the business in order to make a profit, that's what financial IQ is. What does the productivity have to be? It's almost looking at that internal chatter, and we're going to talk about that later on in the presentation today. But when you look at, it's not just living with expenses, it's how does the productivity offset the expenses to make sense. So we've got to be able to, at any time, track and manage your business finances and make sure you're in the loop and that you understand what the numbers mean. I think everyone understands what profit is. I don't think they know how to break down productivity to help profit become more doable or more understandable, or to be able to defend their decision making. So that's what we're going to concentrate on today. Good? Okay. So you have to know it and you have to own it. There's something that, it's funny because as you start owning your information, you almost crave for more. We have here a hotkey on the computer called the F9. And I love the F9. And I'm so glad Brian's in the room because he just shakes his head at me.
Doing it now.
Doing it now, shaking your head. So the F9 tells me at a glance where we are for the day, the percentage of the color sales, what's on the line ready to be entered yet today, what we're on pace to do for the year, what we're on pace to do for the month. It can look at it by brand. It can look at it by location. It can look at it by territory. It just tells us so much. And all you want to do is keep asking questions and looking around and navigating the performance. And it makes so much sense to me. And so yesterday, while I was writing this, of course, I had a question. And I was looking at the F9 key, and I said, oh, I've got to call Brian. So I sent him a text, and I said this, whatever I was looking for. And I said, please advise. And of course, he ran upstairs, and I said, I want to know this now. And of course, Brian's notorious for being able to defend, making you defend it and having you be able to say why this is important and what would you be willing to give up to get this information, right? And of course, I said nothing. I don't want to give up anything. I just want added. So while I was doing this yesterday, I was looking at how does it affect when you discount in the salon? How does it affect when you do a Groupon? How does it affect the bottom line of profit? It might create traffic, but it might have not. It might have been at the expense of profitability. So I said, well, I want to know what percentage we are at any given day, percentage of promotional sales, right? And I said, I want to be able to see that at a glance. That's what I mean by when you know it and you own it, you almost are territorial with it, right? You hover over it and just keep looking around to say, where can we redirect our efforts or are our efforts in the right place? God, I've had a little caffeine this morning. Can you tell?
And so that people don't misunderstand, there's a phrase out there in business. It's called paralysis by analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people who can only look at numbers and not know. In other words, look at them so much that you're not doing anything on them. I think it's important to realize that numbers in business exist to influence behavior. If the only person that those numbers exist are you, in other words, they're only influencing you and your behavior, that's not enough. As a leader of a salon, those numbers and those productivity standards and the expense standards and overhead costs and all of that has to allow you to take action that involves everyone in the business.
Good.
Not just you.
I like it. Good. All right. So now here we go. So we're just going to talk about, and one example of this, there's so many times one of the first questions we talk is, what lease have you signed? And what do you have to do to make that lease be understandable, or that you can defend that location that you're in? And sometimes people build these big salons, and there's a big price tag that they've got to generate on a monthly basis. And right away, when we say, how many staff do you have? Unless they're all working 170 hours a week, you're not gonna do that. And then the owner starts paying the lease out of their productivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about productivity responsibility just on the lease side. So we're going to give the example of a lease that you signed that represents $21,000 a year.
And there's probably a lot of people that would sign up for this lease.
You think this is low?
This is a very low lease.
Okay, well.
But it's an example. That's
an example.
That's important.
Okay, but we've got people, you project the lease to represent 6%. That's where you always say the sweet spot is, 6 to 10%.
6 to 10%.
So we're going to use 6% as the example. Salon would need to generate $360,000 a year to make that lease make sense, right? At 6%, and which is a great number. And then that would be $6,923 a week. Now we've already taken a $21,000 lease, and now in our mind we know we have to be at $69.23, just to put that at that sweet spot. Okay. It takes standards of performance to get there. When you first open and you don't even have employees yet, you know what you're going to do to be able to facilitate that lease. Then as you start bringing people in and they're creating productivity and so on and so forth, that's at 6%. Most people are much higher than that, what we witnessed. I mean, when you've got a $4,000 a month lease, what do you need to generate to be at that 6 to 10% sweet spot? And where are your deadlines to get there? When are you going to have the employees? How many do you need? What do you need their contribution to be? What do you need traffic to be to get there to protect that sweet spot? In our example that we used of $69.23 per week and an average guest check, if our average guest check is $50, we need 138 customers in there every 4.3 weeks. $60, 115, $75, 92, $100 is 69 guests per week.
Well, and this gives us a chance also to talk about the fact that as a leader, we need to always break this down. When you're talking about productivity to hit that sweet spot, as Terry calls it, it needs to be one guest at a time. Mm-hmm. And so you've got two things. You've got traffic and what we do with them. So traffic says the number of guests that need to come into business. What we do with them is where does our target dollar per guest need to be? So for every guest we touch, we know we need, in this example, is $60. We know we need 115 guests a week at $60. That now is something that every single team member can be responsible for.
Well, and here's what's interesting about it. What happens if you had 150 guests in there and you go, we hit the number, 150. Yes, but the average guest check was only $40. So we hit the traffic, but we didn't hit the dollar. And that's why you have to be able to look at both of those numbers and manage both of them and respond to it. If you're at $100 per ticket and only needed 69 guests, but you only had 50 guests come in, so you hit the $100, but you didn't have the traffic count. See, both of them are equally important.
Well, tickets are ridiculous. Let's say you did $100 and you had one guest.
Oh yeah, and you go, we hit the dollar per guest. We hit it.
It's the combination of both, obviously, that make the big difference. And that's what a lot of you know. You can pick out from the ridiculous. Where we miss it is in the moment, as you're going through your weeks and your months' business. The closer it gets, kind of the further away sometimes you get from reality.
Well, most of the software programs that you have in place right now allow us to know what's already scheduled for next week, how many guests are coming in, what their average ticket is going to be, what the projected sales are for the week. So you have an idea. I think we're living so in the moment that we don't influence it. We don't change it up. We don't say, this is our protected area and our protected performance. You know, sometimes Steve told me yesterday that it's one of the only days of the year where baseball, football, basketball, hockey, is that right?
And college football.
And college football are all happening the same day. Do you think they know their stats? Do you think they know where they need to be? I mean, I'm amazed at, if I think about 15 years ago or 20 years ago, number of pitches wasn't nearly the conversation it is today. How many pitches they had in.
Well, and there's a new baseball stat this year, the first time I've really heard much about it, and that's exit velocity. We've always measured the pitch speed right, of the pitch, but not the exit velocity of the ball when it leaves the bat.
So even they are looking at their F9 key. Their F9 key, and they're expanding. We want to know this. We want to know what happens to him after he pitches 100 pitches. They know what the sweet spot is for every pitcher, right? So they know what they need to do. They manage the performance, and that's what we're talking about here. So internal chatter. What I love about internal chatter is once someone hears it, it creates comfort for them. I mean, you say to someone, you need 30 guests a week at $50. They go, well, I can do that. I mean, that's nothing. And you say, then why is it, if everyone says they can do it, why are so many not? And I think it's because we don't tell them the minimum performance that they have to come in at. If I know I need 30 guests, 30 and 50, that's $1,500 productivity a week. But I've got to know that. Instead, when there's not performance standards, they want to go home. They just want to leave. I don't have anything, can I leave? Or can I take off on Thursday? I don't have anything, versus I've got to figure out how to get 3 more guests in here Thursday afternoon, right? So when you look at it, if you start with the 300K number, it can become overwhelming very quickly. If you say to the salon, you've got a bunch of team members around you, we're going to do $300,000 this year. That number sounds like just a ton of zeros. And same holds true for our teams. They need to break it down into the smallest bites of performance. So an example, $500,000 is the same $60 ticket, but we've got to do 8,333 customers tickets this year. That's 160 customers a week. That's not a ton. It really isn't.
Right.
When you look at 160 guests per week, how many customers is that per staff person?
30 guests a piece for 5 stylists.
Okay, that's not bad. So you bring it down to, what do I need to do to generate that, to create a $500,000 business? And that's what I get excited about is, I know what our sweet spots here at PSC are. And I want to look at, there's a number we're going after, and we're about this close to get there on a weekly basis, but everyone knows what we need to generate. And how are we influencing that? When you bring it down and say, okay, this is how much more we need to do per week. That's only this much per every one of you. Why aren't we accomplishing that? It's a small number, but why isn't it coming in? Let's say it's $5,000 a week per someone. And our numbers are different because we're moving product and we've got a whole lot more customers we're talking about. But why isn't it being done if the number is so little? And it's because we're not breaking it down to the ridiculous. Here's an example. Once again, you take that 360 divided by that $60 average. That's 6,000 customer tickets or 115 customers. The 500,000, same $60 ticket, that's 8,333 customers, divided by the 52 weeks, that's 160. So when you look at a $140,000 increase per year in productivity in this example, it represents how many more customers? 45. Can that be done? Yeah. With focus and people saying, this is what we need to do. When you look at what changes the climate, and this is why I called Brian yesterday about PSC, because I thought, wow, if we offer a discount on color services for a month, what will that do to our dollar per guest? What's that going to do? What numbers have to change per week to do our projected forecast? And how will we change our internal chatter about this? So if we do a discount on our color, how many more treatments do we have to do to offset that? Or how are we going to change the way we're presenting our menu, right? I met with a couple of girls yesterday, and they brought in their productivity for, I think it's 7 weeks. And so I was looking at it and I said, the number one service you do is color and blowout with no haircut. And she goes, well, that's not true. I said, well, your numbers indicate it's very true. You had this many of them. She goes, something's wrong there. And I said, why are we catching the something's wrong there right now? Why am I catching that with you? And why aren't you looking at it? And she said, well, I guess because it's a professional document, you think it's right? So I said, you've got to go back and get some answers on this, because either we're not charging correctly, we're not categorizing correctly, we're not doing something right on this. I said, are you discounting your services at all? No. Okay, so why, if you say the number one service you do is this, your average guest check should be this, and it's not. So also the numbers indicated in the employee report, and they use transcripts, shows her average ticket $65. When actually, when you back everything out, it's $145. I said, even this number is wrong. So we just went through and kept looking at it differently, because an employee breakdown was based on services, not customer tickets.
Okay.
All right. So when you look at this, do you know about, can your staff understand their performance scorecard? And in the case yesterday, they didn't. And it's really important that you don't just hand it out, that you also know that we've got to be able to understand it and influence it.
Well, and I think the point of what you're saying is that it goes back to the conversation about automation and computer systems.
Yes.
If computers by themselves made businesses better, every salon would be operating and functioning quite well, because almost every salon has some kind of POS and computer system that they're using. However, the information is only as good as what the setups are to give you that information. And so you can think that you're doing great at leading your team and providing them the data that they need to be able to self-motivate. But if the data isn't right, or the second they look at it, and we notice this in coaching, the second we look at a number and there's one number that doesn't come up right, or that doesn't ring true, then the entire data source is questioned, and it no longer is a number that's able to influence behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So just we can get to that, or we've got that, or we give them that report. It needs to be so, and this is something we all as leaders, we struggle with this too. You know, I'll give you a perfect example. We had a salon that had a question on some product that came in after hours last night. And I've got all the data at my fingertips on my mobile phone. But that's not where I started. Even me, where I started was sending off a text message to a fellow team member here saying, are we out of these 3 products? Well, if I'd have looked at my phone first, I could have seen, and in the time that it took for that person to answer me back, I thought, oh yeah, I've got that right here, and I looked it up and I had the answer because I had it, but I didn't know that I had it in that moment. It's always easier to offload that question or offload that situation to someone else, or think I'll get to that later, instead of I've got it, it's right here. And my example is this, that your people need to be able to feel, I've got it, it's right here. They could look up.
And it's good information.
Even the person that texted me and alerted me of this individual salon challenge could have looked at their phone and had the exact same information. Before they even contacted me. They could have had more information to be able to put in my hands. And then I could have and should have immediately had the answers that they wanted. So it's interesting. Just because we have automation doesn't mean that automation is correct.
It's still a dog
or that the setups are right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because that one question then goes to the next person, and the next person, and the next person, and now you got everybody commenting on it, and now the whole situation is lost in the noise instead of solving the customer challenge. So I hope that story helps, because it's a real life situation that happened here, and it's not that we're short on automation, because we've got that, but sometimes we're short on the utilization of that, and that's what I'm saying for all of you is that like the situation that Terry mentioned yesterday with the 2 hairdressers that she was coaching. They lost all faith in their automation. They lost all faith in the data that was in front of them in the course of that. And who knows? It could have been as simple as the person who gave them those reports printed the report wrong, the wrong parameter. They did it by service instead of by guest ticket. That could have made all the difference in the world. But instead of knowing that should have been something that somebody looks at and says, boom, that's wrong. That's not right. Let's print that again, or let's find out what the parameter is so that we can change that. The thing that bothers me is that when we put out a report or an automation and it's wrong and nobody comments. Nobody comments if they're not using it.
So they said, we have our numbers, and they were so proud, and 5 minutes into it, they're so yeah, that was tough.
I'll bet. I've been there. Yeah.
So talk about discounting and Groupons and such.
Well, it's just, first of all, we say all the time that discounting without permission is theft. And another thing that we say is that most salons that we have ever coached would be profitable if they eliminated the discounting that takes place in their business.
Let's talk about the 6-pack again, because that was I think they could hear that many times.
We were coaching a salon, and we were looking at their numbers over a long period of time in 13-week increments. And we were looking at their numbers for profitability, for payroll standards, and then also for menu purposes, for price change. And when we got to the menu, we were talking about color, highlighting, and I noticed that there was a category that said 6-pack, and it just never occurred to me what's a 6-pack relative to hair color. I know
what a 6-pack is. In other words,
I know what a 6-pack is when it comes to beer, I know what a six-pack is when it comes to physique. I've never had one.
With soda?
I think I've got a 24-pack. I'm not sure. But I didn't know about it relative to highlighting. And she said, oh, that's what we do for if we use just 6 foils.
Or less.
Or less.
Yeah.
And we don't do hardly any of those. We either do partials or full highlights. And I said, okay, let's look at the numbers. And what this owner, what proved, this owner did mostly full highlights. Her staff did mostly 6-packs. Majority of the foil highlighting that was going out was mostly 6-packs.
Alarmingly high.
Yeah. And when I said to her, your number one color service is a 6-pack highlight. And she said, oh, no, it's not. I see everybody, I see the work they're doing. They're either partials or fulls. I said, well, you got an issue. And she looked at the numbers and for the first time realized what was going on. And that's that people were giving full highlights and charging for a 6-pack. Right there in front of her, under her watch. She had no idea because what she saw was a high percentage of full or partials. So that's a way that discounting affects. It's doing one thing and ringing for another.
Well, the other thing I think of is when you have performance standards, they're reluctant to do that because they want to hit the grade.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying you have to be at $100 per ticket, no one's going to give a 6-pack out because they're wanting to protect the performance standard. If that's important to you, right?
Right.
If it's not, if performance is not perceived as honorable, or performance isn't perceived as, what's the word I'm looking for? Not competitive, but that it is desirable to be in the top, to hit the...
Performance has to be part of career path.
Okay.
When it's part of career path and it directly relates to their earning ability,
they won't discount.
They won't discount.
They won't discount because they want to move up. They want their prices to go up. They want their status to grow. If that's not important to them, you've got a problem inside.
When giving away a service in order to get a larger gratuity in exchange for that,
it's a problem.
That's a problem. That's a negative effect in a business. And again, one of the things that we say when it comes to computer setups is that all discounts should be done through couponing. That's something that we demand in our school businesses, that the discount amount and the coupon amount has to tie, and we only issue coupon amounts in certain things. No one is allowed to adjust a service ticket down.
Without approval.
Without leadership sign-off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've just got it locked out. Can't be done. It can be done through coupon, and then that coupon is accountable. And so it has to correlate. And that's just an idea. Same thing when it comes to Groupon. Don't just take a Groupon and mark your service ticket down in order to equal what the Groupon was.
Mm-hmm.
Put in a Groupon coupon, which is where I guess the name comes from, is offering a coupon to a group of people for a price, and make sure that it ties to the number. If you sold 300 of those Groupons, then you should put in a coupon in your system for 300 pieces at a value of this to apply toward a fully priced ticket to net out to what the Groupon is. Mm-hmm. That's when you have control of it, and then you can create a receivable to get your cash back from Groupon as a result of that. So we can't just do it and hope for the best. That's the thing. And quite honestly, when we did our first LivingSocial or Groupon at the schools, it brought us into a whole bunch of things we hadn't thought of before about our system and about what to do and how to do it. And you just can't take large event things like that.
That's not open-ended.
Yeah. It's got to have a system that goes along with that, from a thought process of how you'll handle it when that person presents. I have my Groupon. Here we go.
So when you look at, and everyone would be different, but this situation here is, what are the two numbers that you lock into into your head. When you look at 160 and 60, 160 guests a week at $60 gives us, and you look at how many weeks that is and so on and so forth. That gives you, if you look at 160 guests times 52 weeks times $60, that's $500K. So when we look at it, those are the two numbers you're thinking about all the time and managing off of. Your team would manage off of, your front desk. Now, when you have different pricing, you've got some people that might be lower than that, some people higher than that, but it offsets it. But this is your mindset on where we need to be. 160 guests, 160 guests, 160. If you lose an employee, that's going to put that 160 guests at risk. How do you protect that? Mm-hmm. And how do you stay ahead of it? That's the hard part of knowing how to manage your traffic. Don't just live with what is. You have to be able to influence it. So if we have 120 guests on the schedule for next week, and we know we always schedule 40 or 50 guests, same week, same appointment, we know we're okay. But if we're coming into 80 and we only schedule 40, we're still 40 short. So how are we going to get those and make those up? We can't just say, oh, that was a bad week on Friday versus influence it every single day.
And so, just to prove a point, what's your guest count at this week? Do you know? Mm-hmm. What was your guest count last week? What's your guest count year to date? Are you ahead or behind?
And what's that dollar per guest to me?
Exactly. And to all of those things, if you can't answer, do you think you should be able to? We think you should.
And you could be ahead of it and should be celebrating huge based on your projections, right?
Yeah, and again, sometimes those numbers have stories. You could be comparing 1 year guest count to a previous year guest count, and your staffing number, for whatever reason, either for turnover or for pregnancies or you name it, mm-hmm. can be different. You've got to make sure. You could have drastically changed your hours. You could have opened up salon number 2 and transferred people between, several days a week between 1 and 2. So there are factors, and it's okay as long as you know the factors. But it's not okay just not to know and hope for the best.
Now, we always look at traffic and dollar per guest, but some people like to look at other baseline numbers. And I thought, let's just put it in because some people would have different opinions. Some people look at their square footage. I have 1,600 square feet. It has to generate $69.23 a week. That's $4.32. Some people look at square footage. I know retail locations.
That means nothing to me.
No, doesn't mean anything to me either. Hours of operation, some people look at this. I'm open 40 hours a week, and I need to do $173 an hour per hour that I'm open. Some people like to look at hours of operation. Other people look at, I've got 8 chairs. Each chair's got to generate $866 on an average. So I just put those in because some people look at them. I don't think these are as easily understood by your staff. Traffic and dollar per guest just makes so much more sense.
The way the business happens, one guest at a time.
And that's why we're thinking about that. Okay, so keep the main thing, right? So when we look at, we know our rent, we know our labor cost, or we should, cost of goods to support our professional services and our expenses. These are the 4 main things where we're looking at how we're protecting the business, right? So the rent is a fixed expense. Our commission usually can be a fixed expense based on the percentage that we've locked ourselves into. We don't endorse a sliding scale because it usually is at the expense of the profit. We like to lock in our commission structure and let the increases all be based on pricing, so we can keep our labor cost at a manageable place. Mm-hmm. Cost of goods to support professional services, that's another area where Steve will probably go into in just a moment. And expenses, what are your key expenses? Okay, we're going to go into that. Volume is obvious. We can at a glance. Okay, there's our volume. profit's not obvious, right? Sometimes we don't know till after it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
So systems and controls are what we have to put in place. So let's talk about labor cost. And I know that you like talking about this. Success leaves clues, so if it's going well, it's telling us. And then opportunities leaves clues as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with success leaves clues a lot. I think success leaves clues and we often forget about them. We overlook them. They leave clues. They don't leave knock you in the head obvious insights. But if you look for it, it's there. Opportunity is kind of the same way. They don't necessarily just knock you in the head. They have to be seen and they have to be recognized. And then we, of course, have to take action on them. So it's a choice. If we're looking, you kind of get what you're looking for. If you're looking for opportunity, you'll see it. If you're looking for reasons why you can't, you'll see it. If you're looking for success, chances are you're going to find it. If you're just taking care of the guest that's in front of you at the moment they're in front of you, chances are you're going to struggle. We're in a business that responds to energy. We're in a business that responds to people who want it. And our biggest role, I think, as leaders is to lead that energy and provide people who want to get better and who want to get better at getting better. And so when you look at what are the things you have to put in place, or what are the things that some salons put in place, and so if we look, what should your support labor cost you? What has it cost you in the past? What should it cost you going forward? An inspection, make sure that you're happy with those numbers, and that it works for the business. Sometimes we see that a salon will make adjustment to their hours, for sake of example, and every hour that you're open has an overhead cost to it. You're adding to your rent when you open for an hour of business, because now you're putting people into the equation and fixed cost. And so we see salons adjust their hours, maybe because you've got a staff member that has requested different hours. Well, that adjusts the cost of the business. Is it working for the business? And what happens when that person leaves? You see, sometimes we make exceptions for a person in our business, and that exception doesn't really work for the business.
Give that example of that. Why are you open on Monday?
Yeah, we were coaching a salon, and we looked at the volume of that salon, and they were open Monday through Saturday, and Monday was almost no business. And we said, why are you open for 10 hours or 8 hours on a Monday? And the salon owner said, well, I had such and such whose husband went on a different schedule, and she didn't have daycare, so we switched one of her days of the week so that she was there Monday, and I figured I'm here doing payroll, so I'll come in on Monday too. And we said,
they
okay.
needed a receptionist.
Yeah, and then they needed a receptionist and so on and so forth. And so we said, okay, I don't see that person's name on the roster of team members. And the salon owner said, yeah, she's not with us anymore. And I said, so who's working Mondays? And she was. So you get into a situation where sometimes that's the exact example that I'm thinking of here is sometimes we alter our business hours to accommodate people and don't think about really what's the effect. Does it make dollars?
And how many people have support staff, they are working on a Monday to answer the phone, and there's no labor to offset that cost that day. Now, I know they're scheduling future labor, but it doesn't make sense to me.
This is a very interesting business if you look at it, if you look for the clues that it's trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
We can't tell you the number of businesses, salons that have altered their business hours as a result of consultation with Terry to really bring about a better balance, a better life,
better energy,
workforce balance, better energy in the salon, better, more time for training, all of the things that one thought weren't possible in this business.
Or I don't have time to develop my people.
Right.
I don't have time to do a meeting, and I don't have time. Well, yeah, you don't have time. The way you've structured this, you've got a structure to make sure you meet all the needs.
So all of these things on this particular slide are things that you should be taking a look at and inspecting and saying, does it work for the business? Does it work for me right now? Does it scale? Does it work going forward in the future?
Well, a good question to ask on this is even on support labor. Sometimes we'll say to them, how are you positioning your support labor? We need 2 people on at all times. Well, you're talking about bodies versus how does that affect financially? Is the traffic there to support that decision, right?
And subsequently with new talent labor, how many trainees can the business afford to have
at a time?
If you're paying hourly at a time? There's a formula that can work for the business. You just need to work the formula to make sure it does.
So for example, let's say we hire someone January 1st and they're hourly, and we're going to get them up and running in 6 months. Let's just use that as an example. Going into that 4th month, we should be interviewing for their replacement, not put 2 on now and see which one's going to go first. So one will go out, one will go in, and that's how we protect our labor costs. So I've said to them, when we're talking and Steve and I are meeting with the salon, we'll say, okay, when do you expect Jane to go on the floor? June. Okay. When are we going to replace Jane? Oh, I haven't thought of that. Well, what's it going to do to the business if Jane goes on the floor? How are you protecting the business? So we need to start interviewing in April. So there's a timeline to bring that cost in and that cost to go out. And you have to be able to be ahead of that. Not that you're going to hit it right on June 1st and so on and so forth, but you have an idea of when those components move.
Absolutely. And then if you look at your what Terry lists here as production labor, those are your working stylists. Those are your service providers.
They're generating revenue. Yeah.
Yeah. Revenue generating. The first 2 are non-dollar revenue generating people, the support labor and the new talent labor. So what we have said in previous e-learnings, and you can certainly look back to see what our values and beliefs are on compensation for profit and career path. I think that every single person that you put into your new talent pool, you should have an idea of where they're going to be, what they're going to be learning, and how they walk through your system for anywhere from, we say, a minimum of 10 years. Where am I going to be after year 1? Where am I going to be after year 2, et cetera, et cetera? What's expected of me? Because this idea of just come to work here and join us, it doesn't work in a salon environment. And so we need to offer career path that says this is what's expected of you. These are the trainings. These are the metrics that we're going to look at. This is when we'll know it's time to increase your prices. Who's going to pay for you to move along? It's not just coming out of the business and we have to draw it out of the bottom line of the business. It's going to be based on extraordinary levels of service and measurable levels of loyalty from your guests, your guest count, your ability to set up future reservations today while they're in the salon, what your average dollar per guest is, service portion, take-home portion, etc. Those are very, very important metrics. And then what's your guest per man-hour ratio and what's your service per guest ratio? Those are things that become the metrics for advancement and career path here at our salon.
It has nothing to do, not one time did we talk about commission. It's all about performance and pricing. Okay, let's go into this. This is your gray area too.
Okay, cost of goods. When we look at, and when you look at an overall P&L, you're going to find that it's relatively simple as far as the numbers go. Your top line dollar, most of that's fed in through service revenue and take home sales or retail sales, and then it applies your gross margin after your cost of goods. Your cost of goods, we put in your service providers, your product cost, etc. And then we get down to the G&A costs, general and administrative costs. That's where we put in our service desk salaries, our management or leadership salaries, if there are any. And from that, the things that are double-digit expenses in the salon business are potentially beyond your service providers and your cost of goods sold. It comes down to your rent and your product cost. And everything else is 1, 2, and 3%, all the way down that general administrative expense. So when you look at what should your rent be, Terry's already told you that early on in the slides, and your service, your product cost also comes in anywhere from 6% to 9% of sales.
Or it should.
It should. We find that when it doesn't, it comes from one of two things. Either it's not being managed, no one's looking at it. We find that and here's how we can tell that. When we look at a balance sheet for a salon and their inventory number never changes, it's the same number month after month after month after month. That's impossible, number one, for it to be to the penny every month. It just says that we've plugged a number in there and then we're just automatically expensing anything that we buy on a cash basis every month. Also, there are many that don't separate back bar usage from buying for retail. Retail, for sake of an example, retail usually has a 50% cost of goods, and your service dollars have a 10% cost of goods, as a sake of example. So the profit margin on those purchases are completely different, and so we have to take a look at that. So again, how do we measure it? Are we coding it properly? What controls do we have? There are many different things. How do you control color usage? How do you control that product? How do you measure it? Are we just using it? Are we taking it off the retail shelf when we need it? Are we buying separately for it? What systems and controls do you have in place in order to manage it? Really, really important.
Well, and all the rewards programs that are in place, are you purchasing properly to offset these costs? I mean, really, we've got people saying they've got their professional usage down to very, very small because of the rewards programs.
Some of the rewards programs are very, very generous.
Yeah, they're very generous.
And we'll take care of most back bar expenses, with the exception of hair color. Hair color can be, the caveat that winds up costing that, and that's what brings it in at the 6 to 9%.
Well, and also when we talk about the product usage charge.
Yeah, a way to offset that is to institute kind of a parts and labor product usage in your compensation for profit plan. We almost always, without exception, will recommend that.
10% off the top.
Yeah, if it's a $100 ticket, 10% off the top, we pay commission on $90 instead of on $100.
Right.
And that goes to the parts. We're paying commission on the labor.
So remember yesterday we had our disposal repaired because I put a small spoon down there and didn't know it and wedged it in. They came over and I was so glad it wasn't a lot. And then I also ran into the garage door. So I've had some expenses just with
Terry incurs expenses putting her foot on the floor every morning.
So anyway, it was $85 to fix the garage door labor and $80 in parts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that person wasn't paid on the parts. They were just paid on the labor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the example. And I told you that right when I called. It was $85 for the visit.
I appreciate you breaking that down.
Thank you.
You did that.
Yes,
yeah.
you're very welcome.
And you will pay based on parts and labor as well. Okay, so take home. Take home is such an important part of the salon's overall profitability. Industry statistics show that 70% of a salon's profit before income tax comes from take-home sales. So if that's the case, it requires more than a casual view. It requires
a casual expectation. It has to be specific.
Yeah.
And we make it part of, you raise your prices, but it's not just based on your service ticket, it's your take-home ticket too.
I mean, if you look at, for long periods of time, the traditional department store, it was known that their key profit area was fragrance and cosmetics. And guess what was first in the door of every department store you ever walked into was a fragrance and cosmetics counter.
Yeah.
And still is, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And
the
so
scent and the view.
They couldn't afford to take that casually. They know it's their profit center. They know it has to be front and center for everybody that comes in. How do we manage that piece of our business that is critically important to the profitability of it?
So even McDonald's, what's their number one area making money?
Pop.
Pop. Absolutely pop. And now you get your own and you get a free refill, but they still make the most money on soda.
Yep.
It's unbelievable to me. Even selling it at $1, they make money.
I know. Just nuts.
It is. It's crazy.
So anyway, more than a casual expectation, more than casual planning, more than casual appropriation of labor, it has to be the primary thing. And the reason why I'm thinking that specifically today is that we're coming into the biggest time of the year for take-home sales through the salon. This fourth quarter, the holiday season. How much planning have you put into it? Are you ready? We've got salons that do VIP showings between now and Thanksgiving. They do VIP showings to their best customers, and they allow them to view the holiday offerings and have first opportunity to purchase. They do gift wrapping. They set up pickup dates, all of those types of things that are made available for their guests, their VIPs. Then it goes out to their general population as they do their holiday display and so on. They'll still offer gift wrapping, but they're getting it after all those VIP guests.
You know what's neat? Hollywood Hair, after our last e-learning, or maybe the last two, we were talking about a dessert cart, right?
Mm-hmm.
They now do a treatment cart. And they pass it, they roll it around the salon. This is for hydration, and this is for this. It's a treatment cart. So it's a visual, ooh, right?
Oh, yeah.
Love it. Love it. Treatment cart.
Excellent.
Okay.
So we all have some work to do.
This is our last slide. So when we look at, we've got expenses.
Mm-hmm.
We need to talk about the ones and put systems in place to protect them. We've got our fixed expenses like our rent and our labor. We've got our discretional expenses.
Discretionary expenses, yes.
Well, I spelled that wrong.
Kind of.
Sorry.
But it's unique.
So
It's creative.
discretional. That's like a confusement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, confusement. Coding and organization and managing the expectation. I think that all of this is key to financial IQ. Mostly, when you look at it, it's how do you think about your finances? I think we think more about productivity versus what the productivity has to do to offset the expenses of the business. You know, you lose three, like people say, God, I lost my number one producer. Okay. How are you going to respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in traffic? What does that mean in dollar per guest? What does that mean in, are you transferring those guests to other people where the dollar per guest will be less? How is that going to affect you? And I think managing the exceptions of these things really go into conversation and being able to see the right numbers at the right time. Also, when I call in, I know when I'm on the phone, they're doing an F9 because they know I'm going to ask questions. Where are we at today? What's on the line? How are we doing? It's 4:00. Any resources needed somewhere else? What is your equivalent to knowing at a glance those key numbers? And what does your staff know that you're managing off of and looking at? That's really, really important that everyone knows. And if not, it becomes a hiding place. If you're not communicating the numbers you're looking at and what your expectations are, then they're going to do that 6-pack, or they're going to do and bring up the things in the wrong way because we haven't shown the importance.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember when I was working in the restaurant and we had expectations of performance. You didn't give a hot fudge away. You didn't give an extra cup of coffee away because you know it affected your performance. You just didn't say. But I can remember being in a restaurant once, and a young man said to Steve and Chris and I, we were having lunch somewhere, and they said, I gave you free dessert and coffee. I took care of you. Now I expect you to take care of me. And he said that just like that to us. Now, number one, he was more concerned about the gratuity than he was about his performance, because obviously performance standards weren't important, right? That's what can happen in business if we're not helping and having financial IQ, meaning expectation of performance IQ.
Mm-hmm.
Good. What else do you have? Well,
I think that a lot of this, even IQ, I think, from an ownership standpoint, comes down to an inspection quotient. What do you inspect? And I think that's a lot of what we talked about today. Was, first of all, inspect the systems that are in place,
mm-hmm.
see if they work for the business,
yeah.
and then put in systems and situations that will work for the business, but continue to inspect. It's very important to inspect in order to get what you expect.
I just met with a bunch of future professionals from 2 schools the other day, and the last half hour I always talk to them about interviewing and what I would say and how I would do an interview if I was in their shoes right now. And one of the things that I said to them is what you can expect from me. Say that as an applicant, what you can expect from me. I said, how many of you are always early? And they raised their hand. I said, good for you. Say what you can expect from me is I will always be early to the salon. How many of you have perfect attendance? You can expect on my my disciplines to be here. I had perfect attendance in school. How many of you are morning people or know that your energy is full out? That's what you can expect from me. And you can expect that I love performance. I love contests. I love being in the top 3 of anything I do. Put down what they can expect from you. Don't lie, because I could never put I'm early all the time. That would never be on my list. I could never say I'm a morning person, because I'm not. That would never be on my list. But what could they expect from me? And then I said, turn the table and say, what can I expect from you and your leadership? And one of the things that you have to be able to say to them is I will reward performance-based contributions in my business. And you better be able to say what that performance looks like. You have to quantify it. So at every level, whether it's new talent coming in or someone that's been with us, as Steve said, 10 years, these are the performance standards I'll expect from you in your career path in the salon. If they say, what can I expect from you? You better be able to answer that with confidence and be able to help them understand they'd be in good hands with your leadership in your salon. Right? Good. We're done.
Thank you very much for spending this time with us.
Yes. I don't know what November is. Do you know, Brian, what the topic is?
Pushback.
Pushback. Oh, and pushback can come from the staff. Pushback can come from the customer. Well, we haven't written it yet, but we'll have a good topic with that. And remember, pushback, Steve always says, a pushback comes because you haven't helped them understand it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Once they understand it, they're in. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Have a great month.